The sun spilled gold across the marble floors of the Kadir estate, its rays filtering through towering glass windows that framed a view of endless manicured gardens. The chandeliers sparkled overhead, and the faint scent of jasmine lingered in the air. Every detail of the mansion was meticulously curated, each vase, painting, and cushion a symbol of luxury, status, and taste. And at the heart of it all stood Sahar Kadir, 7 months pregnant and glowing, at least on the outside. Dressed in an elegant pastel maternity gown, Sahar moved with a graceful calm. Her dark hair was pulled into a loose chignon, accentuating her high cheekbones and serene smile. To the world, she was the perfect wife, the embodiment of poise and patience. Her social media was filled with dreamy photos, weekend getaways in Santorini, a gender reveal party under fairy lights, a candid video of her husband, Ramiz Kadir, resting his hand gently on her belly. Thousands of likes poured in with every post. #couple goals. #bless life. Ramiz, her husband, was a man admired and envied in equal measure. At 38, he was one of Karachi's youngest real estate tycoons. Sharp in a tailored suit, with a voice that could charm investors and intimidate competitors in the same breath, Ramiz was the center of attention in any room. He owned not just towers but headlines, and when he walked hand-in-hand with Sahar at charity galas, flashing his dazzling smile, people saw a fairy tale couple living a life most could only dream of. But fairy tales often hide shadows behind their sparkle. That evening, the Kadir estate hosted a formal dinner for Ramiz's closest business allies. The dining room glittered with candlelight and crystal glasses. Waiters glided silently, refilling wine and serving hors d'oeuvres. Sahar sat quietly beside Ramiz, her hands folded neatly over her growing belly, offering soft smiles as the men spoke of property expansions and foreign investments. "Why don't you say something, darling?" Ramiz suddenly asked, his tone sharp behind a polished grin. The table fell silent. Sahar looked up, startled. "I didn't want to interrupt," she said gently. "She never has much to say around business, do you?" Ramiz chuckled, turning to his friends. "She's great at picking nursery colors, though." The men laughed, some awkwardly, some enthusiastically. Sahar forced a smile, her cheeks burning. After the dinner, in the quiet of their bedroom, Sahar sat on the edge of the bed, slipping off her heels. Ramiz came in, loosening his tie, his expression unreadable. "You embarrassed me," she said softly. He turned to her, eyebrows raised. "Embarrassed you? I was trying to include you. By making fun of me?" "Oh, please, Sahar. Don't start with your drama." He waved a hand dismissively, already walking into the bathroom. Sahar sat still, one hand resting on her stomach. Her baby kicked gently beneath her palm, an innocent flutter that made her eyes sting with tears. Lately, these moments were becoming more frequent. Quick flashes of his temper, subtle jabs disguised as jokes, long silences when things didn't go his way. She'd seen glimpses before, but she dismissed them, chalking it up to stress, to pressure, to the demands of his empire. But now, as she sat in the grand bedroom of their grander mansion, her husband's cruel words still ringing in her ears, Sahar began to feel something she hadn't in years: isolation. She told herself to be strong. For the baby. For the image they had built. For the thousands who saw their photos and believed in their magic. Because that's what good wives did. They endured, smiled, and held up the perfect picture, even as it quietly began to crack. Behind the grand facade of the Kadir estate, beneath the luxury and luster, lived a woman trapped in a velvet cage. To the outside world, Sahar had everything: a doting husband, a child on the way, and wealth that promised eternal comfort. But inside the mansion, every decision, every moment of her life was dictated not by her, but by Ramiz Kadir. He monitored what she wore, often leaving subtle or scathing remarks about her choices. "That color makes you look dull," he'd say with a grimace. "Wear the navy dress. It photographs better." She'd comply, folding her preferred outfit back into the closet, swallowing the small bite of her own desires. When friends texted her to meet for lunch or a casual shopping trip, Ramiz would peer over her shoulder and casually ask, "What for?" "You don't need friends cluttering your head with nonsense. They envy you, Sahar. Can't you see that?" She tried once, weeks ago, to sneak out while he was at work, just to have tea with her cousin Zoya. But the driver, clearly instructed, stalled until Ramiz returned early. That night, he didn't shout. He simply stood by the window, swirling a glass of whiskey in silence, disappointment hanging heavy in the room like a cloud. "You left without asking," he finally said. "Do I really need to remind you who you are?" His words echoed deeper than any yell could, and Sahar, defeated, whispered an apology she didn't feel, just to keep the peace. Even her sleep was not her own. Ramiz would insist on her following a schedule he found healthy. Lights out at 10 p.m., no late-night reading, no herbal teas unless he approved the brand. "You're carrying my child," he'd remind her. "I won't let you mess it up with your impulsive habits." She moved through her days cautiously, each step calculated to avoid friction. But in the quiet corners of her mind, she still clung to memories that refused to fade. The Ramiz who once surprised her with breakfast in bed, the man who wrote her notes in hotel napkins, who cried during their first sonogram. Was that version of him gone? Or simply buried beneath the weight of power and pride? It was that hope, foolish, stubborn hope, that kept her from breaking. That made her believe, somehow, things might still turn around. Then came the baby shower invitation. Sahar received it in the mail, a soft pink envelope addressed in elegant handwriting. Her friend Miriam, a fellow expectant mother, was hosting an intimate gathering. Sahar's heart fluttered. It had been so long since she'd been around warmth, laughter, and the simplicity of shared joy. She waited until after dinner, choosing a moment when Ramiz was relaxed, his tie loosened, sipping imported coffee in his study. "I got invited to Miriam's baby shower," she said gently, holding the invitation like a fragile offering. "It's on Sunday afternoon. Just a few girls from school, very low-key." Ramiz didn't look up.
"No."
She blinked. "It's just a few hours." "I said no," he repeated, setting his cup down. "But why? I haven't been out in so long. It's just a baby shower. I'll be back before." The sound of his fist slamming onto the mahogany desk silenced her. "Are you deaf, Sahar?" he growled. "You're not going anywhere. Not while you're carrying my child." She stepped back, instinctively cradling her belly. Her eyes filled with disbelief. "It's not about the baby, is it? You just want to control me." Ramiz stood, his eyes narrowing. "Don't push me." A silence fell between them, thick, tense, and terrifying. She turned away, trembling. That night, in their massive bedroom, she curled up alone on the edge of the bed while Ramiz slept soundly beside her. The invitation lay torn in the trash, a symbol of all the pieces of herself she'd had to give up. And yet, despite the humiliation, despite the fear tightening in her chest, a small part of her still whispered, maybe he'll soften once the baby is here. Maybe he's just stressed. She clung to that fragile thread, unaware that it was the same thread choking the last of her independence. The rain tapped softly against the tall glass windows of the Kadir estate, a low rhythm that might have been calming on any other night. But in the living room, the storm had already begun. Sahar stood in front of the fireplace, one hand on her lower back, the other holding a folded piece of paper. It was a list, baby items she wanted to buy herself. She had asked the house staff to let her visit the new boutique in town tomorrow. A simple outing. An ordinary request. Ramiz stood several feet away, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his jaw clenched. "Who said you could plan anything without telling me?" he asked, voice low, dangerously calm. "I didn't think I needed permission," Sahar replied, her voice just above a whisper. He took a slow step forward. "Didn't think you needed permission?" he echoed, mocking her words. "Do you think this is some average household? That you can come and go like a spoiled teenager?" "I just wanted," she began, but he cut her off. "You're not listening to me, Sahar. You never listen anymore." She saw it then, the shift in his eyes. The wall he kept up in public, the charming mask, had cracked. And underneath it was something far more dangerous. Cold. Possessive. "I'm trying," she said softly. "I'm trying to keep peace. But I'm a person, Ramiz. Not a possession." That word, possession, did something to him. He stepped forward so fast, so suddenly, that Sahar gasped. His fingers clamped tightly around her upper arm. Tight. Too tight. You are mine, he hissed, his face inches from hers. Everything about you, your time, your body, even that child is mine. And you will learn what happens when you forget that. His voice wasn't loud. That's what made it worse. There was no shouting. No broken glass. Just a firm grip and quiet fury. Sahar didn't scream. She didn't move. She simply stood frozen, her breath catching in her throat, her heart racing not from the pain, but from the clarity of the moment. This wasn't frustration. This wasn't stress. This was who he truly was. He released her arm abruptly, as if disgusted, and stepped back. I won't repeat myself again, he muttered before walking out of the room, his footsteps echoing down the marble hallway. When the door finally clicked shut, Sahar didn't move for several seconds. The rain outside grew heavier, wind whistling through the cracks of the window frames. Her legs buckled, and she slowly lowered herself onto the edge of the velvet couch. With shaking hands, she rolled up the sleeve of her silk robe. There, on her pale skin, bloomed deep red fingerprints, soon to be purple, blue, black. She stared at the marks. Not just bruises, but proof. Her breath hitched. The baby kicked inside her, sensing the tension. She gently placed her hand over her belly, whispering a soft apology. Then, slowly, deliberately, she reached for her phone. With the front camera on, she began recording. Her voice was steady, but her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. My name is Sahar Kadir, she said quietly, and these bruises, these were made by my husband. She held the camera close to the marks, documenting every line, every shadow of his grip. After saving the video, she opened a new folder in her phone and labeled it in all caps, Truth. For the first time in years, she stopped pretending. The mask had slipped, not just from Ramiz's face, but from hers as well. No more excuses. No more silence. This wasn't a single moment. This was the moment that would change everything. For the next 3 days, Sahar wore the same smile that the world expected of her. She continued her routines, greeting the house staff with warmth, sipping herbal tea in the garden, posting carefully filtered photos of flower arrangements and restful afternoons. Her captions, as always, painted a picture of tranquility. But behind her soft eyes was a storm gaining strength. Inside, she was unraveling. But not from fear, this time, it was resolve. She avoided confrontation with Ramiz, careful not to trigger another outburst. She remained obedient to his schedule, dressed how he liked, and answered only when spoken to. Each moment of control he tried to exert, she made note of, mentally cataloging every insult, every controlling glance, every restriction disguised as concern. On the morning of the second day, once Ramiz had left for a meeting in Islamabad, Sahar locked herself in the guest bedroom and made a call. It was to Dr. Layla, her therapist, a woman she'd secretly been seeing for months, ever since the first signs of psychological manipulation had started. I need help, she said quietly, her voice cracking. There was a pause on the line. Then, you're ready, aren't you? Yes. I want to gather proof. All of it. And get out. Dr. Layla didn't ask for details. She simply guided her with calm precision. Later that evening, Sahar opened a dusty drawer in the study and retrieved a slim black box, Ramiz's unused backup security camera kit. She'd seen the brand once during one of his tech rants. High-end, motion-sensitive, nearly invisible once installed. The plan took shape like instinct. Over the next day, she installed 2 cameras, one tucked inside a decorative wall vase in their bedroom, and another behind a bookshelf in the hallway just outside. Both would record video and audio, silently capturing their private interactions. She tested the angles, double-checked the connections, and routed the footage to a hidden folder on her personal laptop, one Ramiz never touched. By the evening, the house was wired. Then came the hard part, waiting. She let him belittle her over dinner. Let him rant about how she should be grateful for the life he gave her. Let him mock her suggestion for neutral nursery tones. It was all there recorded. Every smirk, every comment, every poisoned compliment. The next morning, While reviewing the files, she caught a chilling phrase he'd muttered under his breath after she walked out of frame. Ungrateful woman. After the baby, I'll fix her for good. That was the tipping point. Sahar sat frozen for a moment, then opened a hidden contact list she'd saved months ago, a list of women's rights advocates Dr. Layla had once emailed her, just in case. The name Ariba Sultan stood out. Ariba was a powerhouse, a former prosecutor turned high-profile defense lawyer for abused women. Known for her tactical mind and unshakable courtroom presence, Ariba had helped dozens of women expose and escape powerful men. Sahar messaged her from a new email address, writing only one line. My name is Sahar Kadir. I have evidence. I need out. The reply came just hours later. Meet me. No one else. No delays. That night, while Ramiz snored beside her in a drugged sleep, he had taken his usual sleeping pills. Sahar copied all her recordings to a password-protected flash drive and hid it inside a hollowed book on her bedside table. Her hands shook as she replaced the book on the shelf. But this time, the shaking wasn't from fear. It was from adrenaline. From the terrifying clarity of someone who had spent too long in silence and was finally ready to make noise. To the world, Ramiz Kadir was a modern prince, charming, successful, and socially conscious. His face adorned magazine covers under titles like Top 50 Philanthropists in Pakistan and Businessman of the Year. He smiled for the cameras at charity galas, spoke passionately about maternal health at press conferences, and wrote checks to clinics for underprivileged mothers with a benevolent air. There was even a billboard on Sharif Faisal featuring his face, next to the slogan, Strong fathers build strong families. But behind the marble gates of the Kadir estate, the man who claimed to support mothers didn't even acknowledge the mother of his own child with respect. At home, Sahar endured a different version of Ramiz, one that the world would never believe existed. He'd returned from a gala with applause still ringing in his ears, only to look at her and scoff. Did you post anything about tonight's event? People need to see that I'm doing all this with you beside me, he said. Just tag me, she replied softly, already uploading a carefully edited picture. He barely looked at it. Try not to look so pale next time. You make me seem like I married a ghost. The emotional bruises came sharper than the physical ones now. He made fun of how slow she walked, how she forgot small things, how she cried too easily when the baby kicked too hard. You're playing the fragile wife card a bit too well, Sahar, he snapped once. You're not the first woman to have a child. Her every expression was analyzed. If she looked too happy, he questioned her loyalty. If she looked too tired, he accused her of laziness. You're draining, he told her over breakfast one morning. I walk into this house and feel like I've stepped into a hospital ward. But it wasn't just words. It was the way he withheld affection, the way he'd changed the subject when she mentioned baby names or birthing plans. He didn't want a partner, he wanted a submissive ornament. The final blow came one night after a high-end fundraiser in Clifton. Ramiz stumbled in past midnight, reeking of expensive cologne and whiskey. His eyes were glassy, his tie undone, and a smug smile stretched across his face. Sahar was awake, waiting for him in the living room. You said you'd be home by 10, she said gently. He dropped onto the couch and laughed. Oh, I'm sorry. Did the queen get lonely? You promised, Ramiz. I made dinner. Don't you get it? He slurred, waving a dismissive hand. No one cares about your little efforts. I'm the one keeping this empire alive. She looked at him in disbelief. The man she once loved now barely a shadow of who he had been. And by the way, he added, smirking cruelly, you don't get to guilt me anymore. Especially not looking like that. Like what? She asked, her voice cracking. He motioned toward her belly. Like a watermelon. Swollen. Slow. You should see yourself walk like a whale learning ballet. The words cut deeper than knives. But Sahar didn't flinch. She simply reached over and gently tapped her phone, already recording, hidden under the table beside her. Ramiz leaned back, arms spread across the couch, oblivious. I was with someone tonight, he said casually. Someone who knows how to make me feel alive. Not like this endless cycle of whining and waddling. Sahar stared at him, every muscle in her body tense. "Do you hear yourself?" she asked softly. But he didn't reply. He had already closed his eyes, drifting into a drunken stupor, the smirk still lingering on his lips. Sahar sat there in silence, one hand over her belly, the other clutching the phone. She had captured it all, his words, his tone, his cruelty. And with that recording, she gained the final piece of evidence. He had confessed. He had mocked. He had revealed the monster hiding behind the mask. Now, it was just a matter of when, not if, the mask would be ripped off in front of the world. The storm rolled in just after midnight, lightning flashing across the sky, thunder rumbling like a warning from the heavens. The rain came down in heavy sheets, drenching the sprawling lawns of the Kadir estate and turning its polished stone driveway into a glistening river. It was the kind of night that kept most people inside, seeking warmth and comfort. But not Sahar. She stood in the dim glow of her closet, her hands trembling as she zipped up a small overnight bag. Every item had been chosen with precision. A change of clothes, her prenatal records, the flash drive with days of recordings, and a manila envelope containing copies of legal documents, marriage certificates, property registrations, and bank account screenshots. Documents she had quietly collected and photocopied over the past week. Her heart pounded as she glanced over at the clock. 12:41 a.m. This was it. In the master bedroom, Ramiz was sound asleep, his breathing steady, his phone charging beside him. He had returned earlier that evening in one of his unpredictable moods, quiet but cold. He hadn't spoken much. He didn't notice her flinch when he brushed past her. And now, he lay in their king-sized bed, unaware that he would wake up to a life without her. Sahar tiptoed to the nursery in progress, painted in soft whites and creams. She touched the edge of the crib, inhaling deeply. Then, as though reassuring her unborn daughter, she whispered, "We're going to be safe now." She slipped on a long coat and draped a scarf over her hair. On her way out, she paused by the bookshelf in the study and pulled out the hollowed novel where she'd hidden her backup USB. She tucked it into her handbag, her movements practiced and silent. The rain beat against the windows as she stepped into the hallway. Her footsteps were muffled by the thick carpet. At the end of the corridor, the old house driver, Munir Bai, waited, an elderly man with kind eyes who had driven her around since she first married into this life. "I've warmed the car, Bibi," he said in a hushed voice. "I'll take you wherever you need to go." She met his eyes and gave a shaky nod. "Thank you for everything." They moved swiftly, avoiding the main entrance where cameras were installed. Muna knew the estate's blind spots better than anyone. Within 5 minutes, the silver Prado rolled out through the side service gate, swallowed by darkness and rain. As the car sped through the quiet streets, Sahar felt the tears begin to rise, but not from fear, from relief. She looked out the window as streetlights passed in blurs. With every mile, she felt the weight of years being peeled off her shoulders. They reached a small, gated facility tucked in a quieter part of the city. The sign read, "Noor Women's Shelter, confidential and secure." A kindly woman with a clipboard welcomed her inside. Name? Sahar hesitated for half a second, then replied, "Zara Malik." The woman smiled gently. "You're safe here, Zara." In the sparse but warm room she was given, Sahar sat down on the bed, soaked to the bone, heart still racing. She removed her scarf, her coat, and cradled her belly as another flash of lightning lit up the window. The baby kicked lightly, almost as if in agreement. Back at the mansion, Ramiz stirred in his sleep. His hand reached across the bed to find her. Empty. He blinked, confused. "Sahar," he mumbled. He sat up, disoriented, eyes adjusting to the dark. The closet door was ajar. Her side of the wardrobe, half empty. A flicker of realization. He sprang out of bed and checked the hallway. No Sahar. No footsteps. No light. No sound. And in that moment, for the first time, Ramiz Kadir, the man who controlled everything, felt what it was like to lose control. She was gone. By 9 a.m. the next morning, Ramiz Kadir's mansion buzzed with chaos. Security was doubled. Assistants frantically paced the hallways. Phones rang nonstop. But one person was still missing, Sahar. She hadn't called, hadn't left a note. No one had seen her. Her phone was off. Ramiz stood in his home office, eyes bloodshot, knuckles white as he gripped the edge of his mahogany desk. Find her, he barked into the phone. Track every hospital, every driver, every friend. But he was already too late. That same morning, at a discreet law firm tucked into a quiet commercial plaza, Sahar's attorney, Ariba Sultan, filed 2 explosive motions, one for emergency divorce on grounds of domestic abuse, and another for protective custody for both Sahar and her unborn child. Both were accompanied by irrefutable evidence, video recordings, voice clips, medical photographs of the bruises, and bank statements indicating financial control. By afternoon, the legal documents were leaked to a trusted investigative journalist, Meher Saeed, known for exposing elite scandals and giving voice to silenced women. At exactly 5 p.m., Meher posted a tweet that set the internet on fire. Breaking: pregnant wife of real estate tycoon Ramiz Kadir files for emergency divorce, citing abuse. Evidence includes audio, video, and medical proof. Developing story. Hashtag Kadir divorce, hashtag justice for Sahar. Within 30 minutes, the headlines were everywhere. Rolled up newspaper, Millionaire's pregnant wife leaves overnight, files abuse allegations. Rolled up newspaper, hidden bruises behind the billion-rupee smile, the Ramiz Kadir scandal. Rolled up newspaper, hashtag I stand with Sahar trends as audio clips leak online. The leaked clips, only 40 seconds long, were devastating. In one, Ramiz was heard saying, "You're not a person, Sahar. You're mine, and you'll act like it." In another, "After the baby, I'll fix you for good." They weren't shouts or screams. That's what made them more chilling. They were cold, calculated threats, delivered in the smooth voice the public had once adored. The reaction was instant. Comment sections filled with outrage. Women shared their own stories under the hashtag Bruises behind closed doors. Activists rallied. TV channels interrupted regular programming for panel discussions. Meanwhile, Ramiz's PR team scrambled into damage control. His spokesperson issued a vague statement that read, "Mr. Kadir is deeply saddened by the misinformation being spread. The couple has been under strain due to Sahar's delicate health and emotional challenges associated with late-stage pregnancy." Translation: blame the hormones. But the public wasn't buying it. Screenshots of Sahar's past Instagram posts were now being reanalyzed. Observant users noticed the tension in her eyes, the forced smiles, the way her body was often slightly turned away from him in photos. The narrative flipped. She wasn't a runaway wife. She was a survivor. Meanwhile, at the Noor Women's Shelter, Sahar sat in a small office with Ariba beside her, watching the storm unfold on her laptop screen. "I didn't expect it to move so fast," she said, stunned. Ariba smiled. The truth always moves faster than a lie, especially when it's been waiting this long to be heard. Sahar's hand instinctively rested on her belly. The baby gave a soft kick. For the first time, she didn't feel fear. She felt power. Later that night, Ramiz issued a pre-recorded video message from his study. "My wife and I have had our challenges, as all couples do," he began, dressed in a muted gray suit, trying to sound composed. "This is a private matter. I request the public to respect our family's privacy, especially during such a sensitive time." But before the video could gain any sympathy, Meher Saeed posted another audio file. This one featured Ramiz drunkenly mocking Sahar's pregnancy and confessing to an affair. It was game over. By midnight, several sponsors pulled out of his projects. Charities distanced themselves. Talk shows aired testimonies from former staff who had witnessed his controlling behavior. And Sahar? She didn't say a word publicly. She didn't need to. Her silence spoke louder than any press release. The truth was out. And now, for the first time in years, she was in control. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as cameras flashed outside the gates and reporters whispered behind notepads. Inside, the air was thick with tension. This wasn't just a divorce hearing. It was the fall of a public figure, a reckoning long overdue. At the front bench, Sahar stood tall, her round belly prominent beneath a modest navy maternity dress. Her posture was upright, shoulders square, head held high. Despite the exhaustion on her face, there was steel in her gaze, an inner strength that silenced even the most cynical onlookers. Next to her stood Ariba Sultan, her lawyer, calm and composed, a quiet fire behind her eyes. Across the aisle sat Ramiz Kadir, his expensive suit tailored to perfection, but his face paler than usual. His usual smug confidence was gone. He clenched his jaw, staring at Sahar with a mix of disbelief and rage. Next to him was a high-powered attorney flown in from Lahore, trying his best to appear unaffected by the media circus. The judge, an experienced woman named Justice Yasmin, entered, commanding immediate silence. "Let's proceed with the evidence," she said after formalities. Ariba stepped forward. "Your Honor, we are submitting audio and video recordings captured over the course of several days, demonstrating a consistent pattern of emotional, verbal, and physical abuse. The recordings were taken by Mrs. Sahar Kadir within her own home, without manipulation or alteration." The clerk dimmed the lights and pressed play. The room fell quiet as Ramiz's voice filled the air. "You are mine. Your time, your body, mine. And you'll learn what happens when you forget that." Then came another clip. "After the baby, I'll fix you for good." A gasp echoed from the back row. Ramiz shifted uncomfortably. The final clip played, a drunken Ramiz slurring insults, mocking Sahar's body, and casually confessing to infidelity. When the lights came back on, all eyes turned to Ramiz. His lawyer rose, trying to spin the story. "Your Honor, these recordings lack context. My client was under considerable pressure, and the emotional state of a pregnant woman can often color." Sahar rose slowly. "May I speak, Your Honor?" she asked. Justice Yasmin nodded. "Proceed, Mrs. Kadir." Sahar's voice was steady. "For 7 years, I was his shadow. I smiled when he smiled. I stayed silent when he shouted. I convinced myself that maybe I was imagining it. That maybe if I became more obedient, more graceful, more quiet, he would love me again." She paused, breathing deeply. "But love doesn't bruise. It doesn't belittle. It doesn't make you fear the sound of footsteps in your own home." The room was still. "I am not here as a victim. I am here as a mother. My daughter will never learn silence from me." Ariba placed a supportive hand on her back as she returned to her seat. Justice Yasmin sat forward. "I've presided over many cases, Mr. Kadir," she said firmly. "And the evidence here is not just clear, it is horrifying. Your public image does not shield you from consequences." She turned to Sahar. "Mrs. Kadir, you have shown tremendous courage." The judge's verdict was swift. Full custody of the unborn child to Sahar. Immediate protective orders against Ramiz. Financial restitution awarded for emotional and physical harm. Monthly support to be paid into a trust for the child's future. And finally, a formal reprimand for Ramiz's legal team for attempting to shift blame onto the victim. As the gavel struck, sealing the decision, Ramiz stared straight ahead, stone-faced, but visibly shaken. For the first time in his life, power had failed him. Sahar didn't look at him. She didn't need to. Her voice had echoed through that courtroom, louder than years of silence. And that was her victory. The morning light spilled into the hospital room like a blessing, warm and golden. The silence was broken only by the gentle, rhythmic breaths of a newborn. Sahar lay propped against a pillow, her dark hair slightly damp, eyes tired but alight with something far more powerful than relief, peace. Cradled in her arms was a tiny bundle swaddled in white muslin. Her daughter. Her miracle. "Isla," she whispered, pressing a kiss to the baby's forehead. "Welcome to the world, my brave little girl." After months of anxiety, escape, and legal battles, Sahar had brought new life into the world on her own terms, no longer defined by her past, but determined to shape the future. As she looked down at Isla's tiny fingers wrapped around hers, she made a silent vow. No chains will ever touch you. Not in my name. Not in my house. 3 weeks later, in a modest but sunlit office space tucked above a bookstore in Goulburg, Isla's Hope Foundation opened its doors. The mission was clear: to help women in abusive or controlling marriages escape with dignity, safety, and support. Housing, legal guidance, therapy, child care. The organization offered it all. Sahar had poured her settlement money and a portion of the public donations many had reached out after her court victory into building something real, something lasting. She didn't want pity. She wanted impact. Soon, Isla's hope became a lifeline for dozens of women from all walks of life: housewives, working professionals, even elite wives silenced by social pressure. The staff included psychologists, lawyers, and survivors-turned-social workers. And leading it all was Sahar, graceful, firm, and unapologetically vocal. She began appearing on talk shows and women's panels, not as the tragic wife of Ramiz Kadir, but as a beacon of strength. In an exclusive televised interview, the host asked, "How did you find the strength to walk away, especially during pregnancy?" Sahar smiled gently, Isla asleep in a bassinet nearby. "I didn't find it overnight," she replied. "I built it slowly, in silence, one decision at a time. Every bruise, every insult, every night I cried alone. That was the blueprint for my strength. When I realized that my silence was protecting my abuser, not my daughter, that's when I chose to speak." The applause in the studio was thunderous. Meanwhile, Ramiz Kadir's empire crumbled quietly. Following the court verdict, several women who had worked for his companies came forward with their own allegations of workplace harassment and psychological coercion. The case files grew thicker by the week. The once revered real estate mogul had become a symbol of toxic masculinity and fallen glory. No public appearances. No press statements. His name was removed from charity boards. Business partnerships dissolved. Multiple charges were filed: domestic abuse, perjury, and financial fraud, now under investigation by a special legal task force. He vanished from public life, his carefully crafted persona shattered beyond repair. And Sahar? She flourished, not in extravagance, but in purpose. She would often be found at the shelter's community kitchen, helping prepare meals, or sitting in circle therapy sessions, listening more than she spoke. Every time she shared her story, another woman found the courage to take her first step toward freedom. On Isla's first birthday, the shelter held a small celebration. Women who had once fled in fear now laughed freely. Children played. Volunteers hugged. And in the middle of it all, Sahar held her daughter close. "I named this place after you," she whispered to Isla, "but you saved me just as much as I saved you." The pain, the betrayal, the courtrooms, it was all part of her past. But now, her present was filled with something Ramiz could never control or take away. Hope. A soft breeze drifted in through the open balcony doors of a modest two-bedroom apartment nestled on the second floor of a quiet block in Lahore. The sounds of honking cars and hurried footsteps were distant now, like background noise to a new, gentler symphony. Inside, the air smelled faintly of baby lotion, jasmine tea, and fresh laundry. Sahar stood in the living room, barefoot, holding Isla, now a bubbly 1-year-old with wild curls and bright, curious eyes. Sunlight poured in, casting golden lines across their faces as the child giggled and tugged playfully at her mother's dupatta. The apartment was smaller than the mansion she had once lived in. No chandeliers, no marble floors, no gold leaf wall panels. Just soft rugs, second-hand bookshelves, cozy lamps, and walls covered in Isla's handprints and colored drawings. And yet, this life felt infinitely larger. Sahar kissed the top of her daughter's head and slowly walked to the shelf beside her reading chair. There, between a worn poetry collection and a framed picture of her and Isla at the shelter's first anniversary, sat a single flash drive. The last digital trace of Ramiz Kadir. The only copy of the final video, the one that showed him grabbing her arm. She picked it up, stared at it for a long moment. That video had once been her shield, her sword, her proof. Now, it was just a weight she no longer wished to carry. With Isla cooing gently in her arms, Sahar walked to her laptop, inserted the drive, opened the folder, and hovered over the file. Her fingers didn't shake this time. Her heart didn't race. Just a deep, calm breath. She clicked delete. The screen blinked once. Then it was gone. She exhaled as though releasing the last ghost tied to her name. Isla reached up and gently patted her cheek. Sahar smiled down at her, eyes glistening not with grief, but with gratitude. Her life had been shattered once. But from the shards, she had built something softer, stronger, and entirely her own. She kissed her daughter and whispered, "I thought he broke me, but he built the woman who would never be broken again." And with that, she stepped into the golden light of a brand new day.